Part 1 was last week, part 2 is this week. Let's dive into it. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Garmin. This is the Storycraft Society, and last week I started on this cool little mount slash altar slash religious site. I got done basically all of the carving bits. I got it all glued together. I built this little altar, and now we have to move on to the next step. So what that is going to look like is I need to get all of my ground texture down. There's no point in me narrating it without me actually just doing it. So I have my dirt. I'm gonna grab some PVA glue, and we're gonna get to the table and start putting ground texture on. Okay, so actually before I even start doing my dirt texture, I need to get this ready to be the hand that's gonna go onto the thing. And the plan for it that I have mentally is that I want this thing to look like a big stone hand coming up out of the ground, which creates a little bit of a problem because of this metallic finish. So this is definitely one of those things where I'm either going to ruin it or it's going to go okay. But what I've done is I pulled out 4 different grits of sandpaper. I've got coarse, I've got medium, I've got fine, and then I've got extra fine. I don't know if I'm gonna have to go all the way down to extra fine or not, but what I'm gonna do is start with the coarse and try to take all of the polish off of this. And then after I've taken all the polish off, then I'm gonna just keep moving down until I get rid of all the sandpaper lines, and it just hopefully looks like kind of a rough stone texture. We're back with a shredded piece of coarse sandpaper, a much higher grit sandpaper, lower grit, way take stuff off faster sandpaper. And the reality is that this stuff is not coming off, 1, and 2, when it is coming off, it's not coming off and leaving a texture, it's coming off and just making a smooth surface. And I'll do a close-up here so you can see it's just basically like scratching the mirror off. So I think I'm gonna pivot, and instead of making this a stone hand, I'm gonna make it a metallic hand. I don't think that that's gonna change the way that I handle basically anything. I don't think about the painting process, except instead of using gray paints or tan paints, if I was gonna end up making it like a tan stone thing, I can now take this and I can paint it in metallic paint and then wash it and then dry brush it up in metallic paint. And hopefully then it will make this really cool, like, looking metallic hand that's sticking up out of the ground. Equally cool. Sometimes you have to pivot. I wish it would have worked more the way that I was thinking in my head, but you know, that's the cost of doing business, as they say. So next time you see it, the hand will be spray painted. I don't think I'm gonna do the painting before I move on to just attaching it to the base. So I'm gonna go spray it. So we got our hand all spray painted black, which is great. Just like I feared, all of those areas where I sanded off did not even leave a texture. You can't even really tell now that I spray painted it black. But with that done, now what we need to do is attach it to the base. So that's gonna leave one quick step before we can then move on to doing the dirt texture. So what I did was I pulled out my Eileen's tacky glue. I put some on the bottom of this. I also put some around the outside edge just to guarantee that it gets locked in place. We're also going to be doing that with the next step, but I waited until it was just sort of dry, which is really all we needed. And now I can move on to the next step. So what that is going to look like, let me get readjusted here, is throughout the whole thing, we have these areas where there's seams. It looks like little pieces were combined together. Here's one up here. There's those. This is all down here. We've got one here, a bunch of them over here. And what we're going to do is we need to patch all those. So the way that I am going to do that is by putting together a mixture that is 50% dirt, 25% Elmer's glue, and 25% watered down Elmer's glue. And honestly, with that said, that's just kind of a rough guesstimate. What I really want is for it to turn into a putty like this. Then what we're going to do is go into a place where it looks unnatural, and then I'm just going to push that together so that it fills in those sections. And really, as I do this, the goal is to just get it close. It doesn't have to be perfect. So if it's even like remotely close, that will be fine for me. So I'm going to knock this whole thing out and then I'll show you what I end up with. This is only one of 2 ground textures that are going to be going on to this thing, at least that I'm thinking of right now. There are 2 specific areas on this that I want to point out. The first one is there are these flat pieces that are on top, these like straight lines. Those are gonna end up getting covered up, and the way that you do that is just by piling kind of random looking piles on top of them. You can spread some of them out, you can leave some of it stacked, but that is an important one because the sand texture that I'm gonna end up doing next will fall down into that crack and will still leave a line. The next one is the edges of these pieces. And the really important thing is those edges of the tops of the foam end up looking like vertically stacked, and they look like, you know, piece of foam, piece of foam, piece of foam. Doing that on the edge breaks that edge line up so it looks infinitely more rolling and natural. So with that said, the very last thing that I did was I took all of the extra that I had and just put it into clumps kind of all over. Those will dry way down. The glue will dry up and shrink a lot. So like that one looks like it's pretty big, but it actually won't be by the time it's all dry. This one looks really aggressive. This one looks really aggressive. It will not look like that once the whole thing dries. Oh, also worth mentioning, I did take the time to then run that all around the hand. So the hand now looks like it is coming up and out of the dirt, which is great. All right, let's let this dry and we'll see what it looks like when that is the case. And it is now the case. It's been about 24 hours and it is definitely dry. All of the areas have dried down and actually they're really, really solid, which feels and looks really good. And now all of our dirt texture is doing its job. The next thing that we have to do is our second dirt texture, which is very simply just taking PVA glue and spreading it out into all of the open areas and then covering that with sand. That's gonna glue down and make just our regular ground texture everywhere else, and it'll fill in the gaps between the dirt as it exists right now. So with all of this on, you can notice that I actually pile the sand up really, really high. None of the upper sand is going to end up gluing onto the piece. It's actually going to end up making a very flat texture. Very, very shortly, you will see exactly what I mean by that. But piling the sand up on top does not do anything to better or worsen the effect of the sand texture. Not like piling up the dirt anyway, where the dirt, you know, makes mounds and undulations and stuff. But the sand going on in piles, honestly, it's just easier than trying to super spread it out. You might lose a little bit of extra sand that way, but now we have to wait for this to dry. Dang it. So obviously I let the sand dry overnight, and then when it was time to tap it all off, I very haphazardly carried it the whole way outside while filming it. Not the easiest way to do that, and dumped all of the sand off. And now you can notice there is definitely a nice thin layer of sand over everything. It's not the big clumped up areas. And what's most important is we have multiple textures that are all over the piece, so that we've got the regular dirt texture, but then we also have the more compacted sand texture. It's gonna look really solid once we get this thing all painted up. And speaking of painting things up, that's gonna be where we are headed with this next week. I think this is a good place for me to wrap it for this week. And then what we can do is after I get it all Mod Podged up, I'll check in with you all next week about how I'm painting it up and doing the finishing touches. I'm really hoping that next week will be the last week of this series, although I could see it end up becoming another 2 weeks if, you know, I get a hair up my butt that I decide that I want to do something else crazy with it. That could delay it another week, but at least for right now, I think we're gonna try to knock this thing out next week. Hopefully you all are enjoying watching the journey as much as I am enjoying making it. I love doing these kinds of projects, and I think that this thing just keeps getting better and better and better the more I work on it. So I think by the end, it's gonna be really, really cool. But I think that's where I'm gonna leave you for this week. So like and comment down below. That super helps. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do that. That also helps. The number one way that you can help out a YouTube channel that you support is to share their videos with a friend that you think would enjoy it. I mean, that's just better than basically anything. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. And until next week, I'll be seeing you.